Welcome to episode 16 of the Wheelhouse. I'm your host, Andrew O. With me this week, absolutely no one. If you kept up with our episode last week, then you know that Sterling and Gus have been smitten by the trivia god. They will not be joining the show for some time. Maybe they'll come back in spirit form. Maybe not. We'll see. Keep tuning in to find out. But for now, I'm coming to you from the basement of my Maryland home in this windowless pit where I reside. And it is the summer, and it's wonderful because I could just relax and do whatever I want. Some of the things I've been doing. After all, this is a media show, so I'll be talking about some media. I read this amazing horror manga called Uzumaki, written by Junji Ito. Really, really wacky, crazy stuff about a rural town that is infested with spirals, and crazy stuff happens, all concerning spirals. I just love the pace of each chapter, sort of almost an anthology, that there's new sort of elements, and there's a town, and there's something off about it, and as the chapter progresses, more weird things are revealed, until at the very end, there's this really gross, grotesque, full reveal about a spiral. And it's all really efficient, very H.P. Lovecraftian, all around worth reading. The other thing I've read, which I've bought and was meaning to read for a long time, and finally had the time to do it, was 32 Stories by Adrian Tomine. It's a collection of his first mini comic series, Optic Nerve, and it's really good. I'm a huge fan of his work, and you can tell sort of the foundation of what his stories are now was laid in the series. I mean, it's kind of, the quality-wise, it isn't consistent all the time. There's some that definitely stand out and go, wow, this is almost like something he could have written today. Other stuff, you could kind of feel like it's a little derivative of him trying to figure out his style. But one story that really resonated with me was this one about Adrian talking about how it bothers him that we spend about 1/3 of our lives sleeping, which is something that I've thought about a lot. How, when you think about it, 1/3 of your life just, being inactive seems like a huge waste, and that there's a lot of potential to get more work done. He sort of laments this fact, and I lament this fact as well. Besides the fact that, I know it's kind of cliche, but over the summer, man, it is really good to just sleep. I thought that, when I would go into the summer, I would just keep up with sort of my regular routine, get a, consistent amount of sleep, pace out my, daily schedule, but nope. During school, I would sleep around midnight to 7 a.m. and I was completely functional and I felt good. I didn't feel like I needed more sleep. But now I'm sleeping from midnight and waking up at a ridiculous hour, like 10 a.m. That's 10 hours of sleep. It feels very unnatural, but I don't know. I just go to sleep. I just wake up then. It's just what happens. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not going outside enough. That's possible. Maybe it's me recuperating from this lack of sleep that I had over the semester that I didn't realize I was missing. But it bothers me because, like I said before, I feel like there's so much I need to get done, especially when it concerns media, because didn't have a lot of time during the school year. Now that's all I have, just time to read, play, watch everything that I've always wanted to. For example, I've created a little stack of books, 3 books, of sort of great novels that I've just missed during grade school. Fahrenheit 451, Catcher in the Rye, Slaughterhouse-Five. I can knock those out pretty fast, and I have the time to do that. Right now, I'm playing through Sly 2, Band of Thieves, super fun. I want to watch Apocalypse Now. I have it on Blu-ray. It's been sitting there for a long time, just eyeing me down, and now I will. And just besides that, there's all these other, things I want to, play, watch, listen. I want to do a lot of writing. There's just too much to do. One thing that I don't usually do is watch TV shows. And that's just not because I don't think that they're cool or that I intentionally avoid them. It's just that I don't have time. You gotta kind of pick and choose what you can consume. For example, Game of Thrones, everyone gets on my back. Hey, you gotta watch Game of Thrones. I just don't have time. And I know it's something where if I start watching now, I know I'll be addicted and have to watch all the seasons to catch up to where the show is now. That happened to me a couple years ago with Minecraft, where I played a little bit, I knew I would be addicted to it, so I put it off until the summer where I had enough of a block of time that I could just lose myself in it. But for now, I'm choosing to spend my time talking into this microphone. So, if you're listening to the show for the first time, you may be asking how this show usually works. It usually works when I had two other hosts and we would each recommend to each other a media form. And then we would go out and listen, watch, play those recommendations, come back and review them. As my hosts have vaporized, I am now going to conduct a review myself, but stick around because I do have another segment with a guest coming up. But for now, I'm going to talk about our first guest recommendation of the summer, Superman American Alien, recommended by Jacob Estrada. It's a limited run comic series written by Max Landis of Chronicle fame. There are 6 issues out right now. Issue number 7 should be out by the time you're listening to this. It comes out May 18th. And for all intents and purposes, it is another superhero origin story, which is dangerous, I would say, in this day and age, to take on doing another origin story. It is not an easy task because you need to sort of balance the need to be fresh and new, while also not being so radical as to anger and alienate sort of the fans. There's a balance. You need to sort of introduce some new elements while being sort of reverent to what's already been established. And overall, I think Landis does a great job because as I was reading Superman American Alien, I got the feeling that Landis is sort of aware of this issue. Superman American Alien feels very self-conscious. Like Landis knows that people know the Superman origin story and doesn't need to spend a lot of time sort of retreading ground that's already been, tread. And because of that, this series is very, for me, the word that stuck out was it's efficient. The overall story arc, it hits all the pivotal points in Clark Kent's life. You don't ever feel like, because it starts from, him as a child growing up in Smallville to eventually becoming what we now know as Superman. There's no big segments that I felt like were missing, that I felt like, I wanted to know what happens in this part of his life. In addition, it's efficient in the sort of minute-to-minute storytelling and paneling. As you read it, everything just feels right. There's a brisk pace overall, but there's always just enough time allocated to all the, important moments of dialogue or emotional beats. So it never feels like there's any wasted time or space. In that same vein, whenever there's sort of these iconic moments or nods, they never feel trite because they don't spend too much time to linger on it. When John Clark dons the cape for the first time accidentally, it feels great. It doesn't feel forced, but it doesn't, again, spend too much time to point out, hey, look, he's wearing the cape now because he's Superman. When, Clark moves to Metropolis and works at the Daily Planet, meets Lois Lane, these are all felt very natural. And some more obvious references, like when Lex Luthor drops the name Man of Tomorrow. Again, he just drops the name, moves on. Just sort of this subtle nod. In addition, the sort of character transformation overall is not trite. Because we see, Clark Kent grow up to become Superman, we still hit all the expected story beats. Sort of, him coming to terms with his powers, learning to manage them, transitioning from just sort of a bystander to being an active intervener in crime, in fighting crime, and sort of past that getting more philosophical and sort of reflecting on his role in the universe and his role, on Earth. And again, don't feel forced because the plot moves at sort of a consistent pace. It never feels like it lingers too much to point out like, hey, we're going to take a break now and think about all these serious issues. It just does a good job of just moving the story along, building character consistently through the whole time. And the supporting cast is excellent. And sort of building sort of a rich supporting cast around Clark Kent also adds to his characterization. Jonathan and Martha Kent are younger than in other portrayals. And again, I'm not a Superman expert, so I don't know if this is the norm, but it was sort of refreshing to see, some younger parents having to deal with Clark Kent. They're very human. They're very believable. All their scenes of dialogue with Clark are very sentimental, but not overly sentimental. In issue number 6, the argument Clark Kent has with Pete Ross and the sort of resolution is very great. Sort of, again, laying down some philosophical issues without being too preachy. And overall, the introduction of other DC characters in the DC universe are phenomenal and very humorous at times. You have appearances from Batman, Lex Luthor, and also some surprising ones like Deathstroke and Dick Grayson, and some Green Lanterns. And it just helps to establish that Superman's role and his place, that he exists in this larger universe. So you do have a lot of, it is focused on Clark Kent overall, but because there's such this developed world around him, it just paints overall this very, very complete picture. My main negative with Superman American Alien is the art style. Each issue has a different artist, and for me the style is sort of hit and miss. I know something like Sandman has done that before, but usually it's longer runs with the same artist before the style changes. Whereas each issue, new artist, and sometimes the style, it changes a lot. It goes from being more realistic to more cartoony, from the coloring to be more vibrant to sort of more gritty. And I sort of wish that it was sort of the same artist stayed with the story. But despite that, Clark Kent himself feels the same throughout the whole story, which is sort of the more important point. That he feels the same. You feel like he's the same person growing and developing. So in summary, Superman American Alien it's very balanced and does a good job. When I mentioned before, I'm not being preachy. It pushes this sort of carpe diem theme and this idea of how Superman needs to become this sort of symbol of hope. It does all that with not being sort of in your face. It does it all very gracefully with nice characterization and good action to just create a well-rounded Superman origin story. So I'm very much looking forward to the final issue, number 7, and I'll be reading it, and you should too. All right, that was my review for Superman American Alien, recommended by, who is this? Jacob Estrada, what are you doing here?
I don't know. I just wandered around my house and somehow I ended up multiple states away.
Yes, and now you are podcasting with me on the Wheelhouse.
Actually, where do you live?
I live in Maryland.
That's right. Okay. For some reason I wanted to say Connecticut, but I guess that's just really wrong.
That is really wrong. But thank you for recommending Superman American Alien. I thought it was really, really good.
Good to know.
You could listen to my
final issue comes out this Wednesday.
Yeah, I saw that, which I was kind of bummed. I wanted to review the whole thing as one, but it is what it is. Anyway, you're here because we have a new segment on the show called Who is Bruce Springsteen? Inspired by your musical ignorance. And we've compiled a list of 15 essential albums that we think Jacob should listen to. And the first album we are talking about is Kind of Blue, the 1959 Miles Davis jazz album. So, it's generally considered the greatest jazz album ever released, and just straight out one of the greatest records of all time. What did you think, Jacob? First impressions, or maybe before you listened to it, did you have any thoughts going into it? Were you kind of nervous? that maybe you wouldn't understand it or you didn't know what to expect?
I didn't know what to expect, and I was kind of worried that I just wouldn't know what to say because I don't normally do. I don't know what I would call this. I guess a review or a discussion. I don't normally do this kind of thing about music because I talk about movies.
Yeah.
Which are a vastly different medium. And so going into this, I was just kind of like, I don't know. I guess I just listened to it and talk about it. And so when it started, I was immediately more nervous. So like, fuck, there's no words. It's like, there's no words. I don't know what to talk about then. Because like I think of things as like a narrative or like a story, and it's like, okay, so it's literally just sound. The part that's hardest for me to talk about.
But you listened to it.
I did.
All the way through.
Yeah.
And what do you think overall?
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I don't know how to go into detail about that because it's just the music. There's no words, so like I don't know what am I supposed. Yeah, I enjoyed it, and it was very like it was fun. It was relaxing, and yeah. I mean, I don't know. Damn it. You know what I should have done? I should have just like read somebody else's analysis of the album online, and then just memorized it and recited that for your podcast.
Oh man, make sure to cite your sources. But I'll give some background on Kind of Blue. It was released August 17th, 1959. Got Miles Davis, who was the mastermind behind this project, as well as the lead trumpeter. You have Julian Cannibal Adderley on alto sax, John Coltrane on tenor sax, Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on double bass, Jimmy Cobb on drums, and Wynton Kelly, who did piano on Freddie Freeloader. So, this album is considered groundbreaking in the music world. I take it that your mind wasn't blown when you first listened to it.
No.
My mind wasn't blown either the first time I was listening to it, but I'll get to that point later. It's considered groundbreaking because at the time, the predominant style of jazz was bebop. And that style of jazz is a lot more fast-paced, has a lot of complex chord progressions with a virtuoso improvisation over it. Miles Davis thought that it was limiting. He thought the chord changes were becoming way too complicated and sort of hindered sort of experimentation. So in response to that, he created what is known as modal jazz. Of course, he didn't create it himself. He had some influences beforehand. In 1958, he did a piece, Milestones, which was sort of his first experimentation with modal jazz. And in modal jazz, it favors modes over chord progressions. It's a lot more slow-paced. And sort of it forces the soloist to sort of improv and keep the piece interesting because there's not a lot of foundational changes. For example, in So What, the first track of Kind of Blue, there's only two modes, a D Dorian and an E-flat Dorian, for the whole song. So it forces, Miles Davis and the saxophone players, when they have their solos, to keep it interesting.
Yeah. I knew some of that only because I read the Wikipedia page.
Yes, and I read that as well as some other sources. But I think that the interesting thing to talk about for Kind of Blue, especially, from our perspective, is that I feel like jazz is too smart for me, and probably you as well. It's sort of, you feel...
Yeah, that sounds right, actually.
Yeah, it feels like it's a thinking man's music for the erudite,
Yeah. I feel like I'm several, hundreds of albums away before I should be listening to and trying to appreciate this.
And I think, we've talked about Harvey Pekar on this show, in his series American Splendors, and he loves jazz, but he talked about that too, how, it's more, you can't sort of put it in the background, you got to kind of actively listen to it. And I think there's something to be said for how, when we listen to it, we feel like we're not listening to it correctly, like we're almost illiterate,
That's exactly what I feel like.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this song about?
Yeah, you feel like...
Is it not about anything? Then what am I supposed to...
Yeah, you feel like, am I supposed to be listening for something?
What am I supposed to listen to?
Exactly. For me, I have a limited musical background. I took a couple years of piano. I learned alto sax in middle school, high school. but I never got to learn any sort of the musical theory that would help something like listening to jazz. Because for me, when I listen to music now, the main thing I'm paying attention to is emotion. I go, okay, are these lyrics moving me in any way? Or is there some melodic hook that really, sticks with me and resonates with me? But for jazz, not only do you have that emotion thing to worry about, it's something where you have to be conscious of technique. And if you don't know that, then you're I feel like you're missing some part of the music. I have a great analogy. Citizen Kane, right? It's heralded as one of the greatest films of all time. Mm-hmm. You watch it now, you go, okay, that's a cool story, but it's hard to appreciate sort of the technical aspects of the film if A, you don't know a lot about film, and B, just the fact that you're watching it now.
That's true.
Sort of all the techniques it pioneered are just everyday now. Like deep focus, L cuts, the use of flashbacks. We see that all the time now.
That's absolutely true.
So it's sort of hard to appreciate because, us, we watch a lot of movies, we're film majors. We had that film vocabulary built up where we could look back and say, oh,
yeah,
look at Citizen Kane doing all these great things. Or something like Kinda Blue, we really don't know jazz. Like, I've kind of dabbled in jazz a little bit, but I don't have that huge, pool of jazz knowledge to go, oh, wow, really, Kinda Blue was a great break because it pioneered modal jazz instead of bebop. I just read that on Wikipedia, I don't really know what that means.
That's exactly right. I mean, listening to this song really makes me think, man, I should probably take a music theory class or something.
Which I guess is good, that it moves you in some way.
Yeah, it does. It makes me want to learn more about it. But as it stands, I can't say much more beyond, the feeling of the song, which, for the most part, most of these are upbeat, except for All of the Blues, which was clearly very sad, as a title like All of the Blues would imply, and what the titles imply.
Yeah. Do you have any, that being said, do you have any favorite songs on this album? Anything that sticks out to you?
I would say All of the Blues, mostly because the song sounds like what the title leads you to believe it sounds. Like it's, yeah, it's definitely, or at least for me, it's the most clear.
Yeah.
Because Freddie Freeloader, and then you hear the song, it's like, okay, what the fuck connection am I supposed to make between that? But it's like, All of the Blues, it's like, well, that title sounds sad, and then the song sounds sad. It's like, okay, well, this matches at least, so.
Well, for me, in that same vein, I really like Blue is Green, because it is sort of a more slow-paced, slow song on the album.
Yeah.
It's very moody, felt like very film noir almost, again, making that film connection. Mm-hmm. And So What, also the first track, I think is just great. Yeah. Love how it begins, and again, sort of the simplicity of the foundation, but then all the solos that are built on top of it are really interesting to listen to. And I feel like it's a sort of an album where if you listen to it many times, you sort of piece together new things, you learn new things about it. But again, with our limited background, there's only so much we can get out of it. But any final thoughts on Kind of Blue?
Oh, but I was saying the title wrong. It's All Blues. Okay. But anyway, I don't know. I mean, I definitely like to listen to it some more and just try to derive something from it. I mean, I definitely enjoyed it, and I do hope the next album you guys have me listen to, has words. That'll probably make it easier.
We'll get to that we'll get to that in a second. But just my final question, I guess, is: does this interest you into listening to more jazz?
Down the road, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Good to know. All right. To summarize this bit, I found this quote that I think is very apt. Talking about music is like dancing about architecture. And then that fits really well with what we've been talking about. So keep that in mind. All right. So that is our first iteration of Who is Bruce Springsteen. I think we're off to an okay start. Kind of Blue is, I don't think it is, might not be the best way to start, but it is an essential. So
Okay.
But next, this upcoming week, the next album you have to listen to is an absolute masterpiece. It is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
Okay.
and has words, so that's a plus.
Yes, it is.
What is so amazing? All right, today when we're recording this, May 16th, 2016, Pet Sounds was released exactly 50 years ago today.
Wow.
Yeah, could not have planned that better. It's pretty cool. It's the Beach Boys' 11th album. Like I said, I think a lot of people think it's an absolute masterpiece. Sort of Brian Wilson, his unique and elaborate musical arrangements, along with these complex vocal harmonies and just gorgeous melodies, makes it an essential album. And I think you'll like it a lot more. It's a lot more poppy. Yeah, overall, it is pretty phenomenal. And Beach Boys, they did Good Vibrations, not Marky Mark's
Okay.
Good Vibrations.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
Although that song's not on this album, but a lot of amazing songs on here, and arguably one of the greatest songs of all time. We'll see what you think about it when you listen to it. So, yeah. Any final thoughts for Who is Bruce Springsteen? How are you feeling overall going into this essential album thing?
I don't know. I mean, I felt like I am definitely aware of my musical ignorance, and I've been meaning to explore more music for a while now. I just haven't gotten around to it, so I do look forward to this, and it's an interesting experience. So, I mean, yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I think this has been really, really cool.
Yes, thank you for doing this, and Pet Sounds I think you'll like a lot more. So, all right.
Okay. Well then, see you, man.
Thanks, Jacob. And that was our first iteration of Who is Bruce Springsteen with Jacob Estrada. Hope you enjoy that. I think it'll be an interesting ride as we continue through our journey of essential albums. And thank you for listening to this experiment of a Wheelhouse episode. This is what we're going to be doing. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I do have to play another guest recommendation for next week. Let's see. And I think it will be, yes. I have a recommendation here from Faris Shaheen. He recommended an album and pre-recorded this, and you'll be listening to it right now. Where were we? I'm here with Faris. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
You have something to recommend.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's an album called Maps of Non-Existent Places by a band called Thank You Scientist.
Right off the bat when you told me that, I was like, this is very interesting, because I think the album name and the band name is really cool. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of quirky and unconventional.
Yeah. It's like a movie quote, actually.
Oh, really?
I don't know what movie, but...
The album name or both?
The band name.
Band name?
I don't know about the album name. The album name is mentioned in like the opening song, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the band, when they played, they mentioned that was some quote from a movie, but I don't know what movie.
I might have to look that up.
Yeah.
So, you said this is a very recent album, right?
Yes, it came out in 2014.
Cool. And you heard of them from like another show you were attending?
I went to the Coheed and Cambria Never Ender for In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. Mm-hmm. And they were one of the opening bands because the main singer of Coheed has his own record label, and they had just been recently signed to it at the time. Mm-hmm. So they were an opener. This band called Russian Circles, which is like an instrumental band, but it's like metal only.
That's cool.
Which was, it was pretty interesting. And then Between the Buried and Me was the other opener. They're kind of like a progressive metal band. But it was different because they have like a trumpet, a saxophone, and a violin in their lineup. But they're like a metal band, like a progressive metal band. So it's not ska, which is like that's typically where you would expect to see that instrumentation.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the genre because I had no idea. Yeah,
it's like iTunes just calls it alternative, but they're like a progressive band, so it's kind of like Coheed and Cambria style, but it's more like hard rock. But yeah, they have all those other instruments, and they utilize them very well, which is what kind of piqued my interest. So I was like instantly hooked on the album because it's a really good album.
And so, is this their only album right now?
They have one that came out before it. I've never listened to it. I just recently picked it up, but I think they're writing a new one right now. So this is all they have right now, but it's really good. So.
And so, from what I know about you, you love music and you love seeing live music.
Yes, I do.
So why would you pick this one album out of all the other musics that you love?
Mainly because you had never heard of it before.
Okay, that's good. That's a qualifier.
I don't know. I mean, it's like kind of covering. I was trying to, I guess, come up with something that was different than some of the other stuff because I mean, I'm a big grunge fan. I'm a big punk fan.
Love that Nirvana.
Right, and you had covered Nirvana, and obviously, like, if you haven't heard, like, Nevermind and stuff, like, what are you doing with your life? Yeah. But even just, like, Green Day, you know, like, if you haven't heard, like, you've at least heard of those albums if you haven't, like, listened to them yourself. So it was kind of like, I always enjoy finding bands that not a lot of people have kind of found and that are, like, really cool, that need more kind of recognition. So,
and then when they become popular, like, I liked them before they got popular.
No, I'm just like, yeah, they did it. Like, somebody else realized it. Which I think this band is going to take off pretty soon, since they did just get signed. Yeah. Or, I mean, it was a few years ago, but, like, they're constantly touring now. So, it'll be cool.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
So, this week, Maps of Non-Existent Places by Thank You Scientists. I'll be listening to that and then reviewing it next week, in addition to talking about Pet Sounds with Jacob, in addition to playing one more guest recommendation, The Cycle Never Stops. Except for now, because we've come to another end of another episode of The Wheelhouse. Thank you for listening. What you can do now is go to our Facebook page, like it, at facebook.com/wheelhousecast. Follow us on Twitter at wheelhousecast. Subscribe and review and rate us on iTunes. And finally, if you have anything you want to recommend yourself or want to give any opinions, anything we've talked about, that has been talked about or will ever be talked about in the history of history, you can email the Wheelhouse at wheelhousecast@gmail.com. Rest in peace, Gus. Rest in peace, Sterling. I'm Andrew O. No pun today. Summer. No puns. No one to yell at me. So goodbye.